Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Alright folks, so join me and grab a coffee and brace yourselves for another episode of left-wing governments screwing over their own people. And this time the emphasis continues to be on Canada. Yeah, once again, CCP Mark Carney thought that he could play the tough guy. He thought that he was in the driver's seat, he was the one setting the terms of negotiation. And so he thought it was a genius idea in the midst of the negotiations with the United States to hit American tech companies with a digital services tax.
We knew it was coming. We hoped they wouldn't do it. Canada has this digital services tax, and several other countries do too. We disagree, and we think that they discriminate against U.S. companies. But what Canada did here, as of Monday, they're going to implement a retroactive tax. And we think that we don't like the taxes, and obviously we think it's patently unfair to do it retroactive. This was something from the Trudeau years. So we were hoping, as a sign of goodwill, that the new Carney administration would at least put a break on that during the trade talks. They seem not to have. President Trump has responded, and my inclination is that Ambassador Greer over at USTR will be starting a 301 investigation into the digital services taxes to determine the amount of harm to the U.S. companies and the U.S. economy in general.
After all the turmoil in the middle of negotiations, they decide it's perfect time to let this tax go through. And obviously we saw the Trump response. Yeah, he wasn't having any of it. And then lo and behold, 24 hours later, the Canadian government has caved. A little womp 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 FAFO moment. Yeah, one thing is clear about Canadian politics and Canadian leadership. They're obviously obsessed with political posturing and playing to Trump deranged narratives instead of actual good policy. Here they are running a trash economy and trying to mooch off American success instead of building their own. And President Trump said absolutely never. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright folks, so we just spoke about this maybe 48 hours ago, but like I said, less than 24 hours after that initial video dropped, well, here's the update.
Last night I had a good conversation with President Trump, and we agreed to recommence our negotiations with a view to the 21st of July deadline that we had agreed in.
Did you get anything in exchange for?
We have, to be clear, it's part of a bigger negotiation. It's something that we expected in the broader sense that would be part of a final deal. We're making progress towards a final deal. There's more to be done, to be clear. As I just said, which answers the translation question, as I just said, is a question of timing in terms of the date for the final negotiations and when the tax was coming into effect. And, you know, it doesn't make sense to collect tax from people and then remit them back. So it provides some certainty. And as I just said, the negotiations have restarted. We're going to focus on getting the best deal for Canadians. We're making progress. There's more to do, and we'll keep you updated.
Canada says it's now dropping its digital services tax on American tech companies days after President Trump says he's halting all trade talks with Canada. First, what's the president's reaction to this? Can you tell us more about his call with Prime Minister Carney over the weekend? How did he get Carney to drop it? And also, what's the impact on American tech companies given this latest progress, as the president says he has been fighting for American tech companies?
Prime Minister Carney in Canada caved to President Trump in the United States of America. And President Trump knows how to negotiate, and he knows that he is governing the best country and the best economy in this world, on this planet. And every country on the planet needs to have good trade relationships with the United States. And it was a mistake for Canada to vow to implement that tax that would have hurt our tech companies here in the United States. The president made his position quite clear to the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister called the president last night to let the president know that he would be dropping that tax, which is a big victory for our tech companies and our American workers here at home.
Canada caves. Here's the official announcement from the Department of Finance Canada. Canada rescinds digital service tax to advance broader trade negotiations with the United States. So basically, Canada's bright idea here was a 3% digital services tax, which they actually cooked up back in 2020, basically following the lead of the European Union. They wanted to hit American companies like Google, Amazon, and Meta Canada with payments due on June 30th of 2025. Essentially, they wanted to siphon off a couple $1 billion in tax revenue off US tech giants, and so this was something that was in the pipeline already for a while. But you would think, considering how poorly things were going, considering how rightfully annoyed and frustrating the President of the United States is, you'd think after an entire election season of bad faith attacks that maybe Canada would get a hint and say, yeah, maybe let's pull back on this predatory tax now, shall we? But of course, they steamed forward without even a thought. And honestly, it's not exactly surprising why. The Canadian economy is absolutely trash. It's basically like 50 or 60% government spending at this point. Canada's not really doing anything, not really fostering any innovation or entrepreneurialism, and so instead of creating a productive economy that produces for its people, Canada's government is out here once again playing tax collector, trying to milk American companies for cash they didn't earn. In other words, another lazy cash grab to prop up their stagnant economy. The typical socialist game. I mean, why innovate when you could just slap a tax on American tech giants who actually create jobs and wealth? And really, after all the chest flaring from the last Canadian federal election, after all the talks of dollar-for-dollar tariffs and retaliatory tariffing, this is what we end up seeing. Canada postured as if they were on equal footing, and the Canadian people seem to vote based on that premise. And talk about a reality check now in the middle of negotiations. They come in trying to swing a big bat, a digital services tax, and 24 hours later, they cave. I mean, instantaneously. If anything, it exposes Canada's weakness and clear dependence and reliance on American industry. I mean, it's just a pathetic fold. It's not surprising, but it's utterly pathetic. You know, you can't claim to be a proud, independent nation who's fighting for something so righteous, fighting against the unacceptable bullying of the United States, only to cave in less than a day. And you know, this situation doesn't just expose Canada's weakness, but it also exposes Canadian leadership as being clearly more interested in looking good to the globalist crew rather than standing up for their own people. I mean, if they truly believed in this tax, they'd have fought for it, found a way to negotiate, or at least held out for maybe a week. But instead, they showed the world that they're just a doormat for the United States, at least when the going gets tough, you know, and the stakes get real. And that's really the saddest part of this whole situation, because who's getting betrayed? It's the Canadian people, who Donald Trump, by the way, once again just came in and saved your behinds, coming in and slashing a tax for you. And I'm sure the argument from Mark Carney and his cavalry of clowns, well, they would tell you that actually this tax would have helped Canadians. But give me a break. The whole purpose of this tax was to create another source of tax revenue to continue patching up the failing economic engine of Canada. Another band-aid fix that ignores the core issue at hand. You know, a real leader would have fought for a strong economy, would be talking about lifting taxes and increasing productivity, but instead Mark Carney's just looking for the headline. They'd rather play political games and tax American success than lift a finger to build something worth a damn themselves. And it's so funny because they keep talking about how destructive of a politician and leader Donald Trump is, yet here they are wanting to mooch off of his success. Well, President Trump once again shows the world what real leadership looks like, and Canada's left looking like the kid who got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. It's just not a good look. And once again, tough guy Mark Carney is shining President Trump's shoes, kissing his damn feet and looking like a complete fool. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.